Hey, welcome. So, what if I told you that the cure for a country's biggest problems, we're talking its debt, its demographics, its entire future, wasn't some new economic policy, but was actually biological? It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, that is the radical vision of scientist Amri Amarov Drury, and we're about to dive deep and unpack it.
I mean, just read that. America's future runs on longevity biotech, not AI. In a world where AI seems to be the answer to everything, this statement feels, I don't know, almost crazy, right? But this is the core idea we're going to explore today.
Okay, so it's a huge claim. How on earth could living longer possibly fix a nation's finances? Well, to really get the solution, we first have to understand the sheer scale of the crisis we're actually facing. All right, first up, let's talk about America's existential crisis. We need to get a clear diagnosis of the problem. Let's start with the big one, the national debt. We're talking $37 trillion. It's a number that's so big it's hard to even wrap your head around, but it's like this massive anchor dragging on the whole economy, messing with everything from interest rates to how much we can spend on public services.
And then there's the fertility rate. See, for a country to just maintain its population, you need a birth rate of 2.1. The US? It's below that. And what that means is you've got a smaller and smaller workforce trying to support a bigger and bigger group of retirees. That's a recipe for trouble.
But the real monster in the room, the thing driving so much of this spending, it's healthcare. The price tag for Medicare and Medicaid is just skyrocketing. And most of that money isn't just for getting old. It's for treating the brutal, chronic diseases that come along with it. And here's where it all clicks together. All of these massive problems, they actually stem from one surprising place: aging itself. You see, we've gotten incredible at extending our lifespan, how long we live, but we've totally failed at extending our health span, how long we stay healthy. So the result is a society where we're living longer, sure, but we're also living sicker. Okay, so that's the doom and gloom. But what if aging isn't this inevitable thing we just have to accept? Asking that question opens the door to a completely radical new vision, one that flips this entire problem on its head. This right here, this is the whole game changer. The goal is not to have more frail 90-year-olds. No, the goal is to let people stay biologically 25 for as long as they want. It's not about tacking on more years to the end of life. It's about adding more healthy, youthful life into our years. And if you can actually pull that off, well, all those crises we just talked about, they basically start to solve themselves. A healthy population barely needs healthcare, right? A workforce that can be productive for centuries can save for its own future. The GDP would just explode. And if you extend the biological window for having kids, the fertility crisis, well, it just disappears. I know. This sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but there's actually a framework for how we might get there. It's called the ABCD plan, and it lays out the different roads we could take to achieve radical life extension. So you've got four options. Plan D, that's death. That's our current default setting. Plan C is cryonics, freezing yourself and just hoping that someone in the future figures it all out. Plan B is bioengineering, which is what we mostly do now, tackling aging one disease at a time. But Plan A is the most direct. It's just simple replacement. Just like we swap out old parts in a car to keep it running, we could do the same for our own bodies. The amazing thing about Plan A is its simplicity. Kinda. The idea is that we don't need to completely understand every single detail of why we age to stop it. We just need to be able to replace the worn-out parts. And the science is already heading in this direction. I mean, researchers can now create human embryo models from stem cells. That's a huge first step toward one day being able to grow your own genetically identical replacement organs on demand. Okay, so that's the dream. But let's get real for a second. A blueprint is one thing. Reality is something else entirely. Before we get too carried away, we have to look at the massive hurdles that are standing in the way of this future. So what's the holdup? Well, first, you've got regulation. You can't get a drug approved for aging if the FDA doesn't even consider it a disease. Then there's funding. It's just way easier to get money for a new cancer drug that might extend life by a few months than it is to fund research into the deep root causes of aging. And finally, the science itself is just slow. It takes decades and a ton of smart people to gather the data we need. And this quote right here, it really gets to the core of the challenge. This isn't like software, where you can write some code, hit compile, and see the result instantly. Biology has its own clock. You could invent a life-changing therapy today, and you might have to wait 20 years to find out if it actually works in a person. You just can't compile a solution to aging. But the science might not even be the hardest part. This kind of technology is going to force us to face some of the deepest, most profound ethical questions imaginable, especially when it comes to the choices we make for our own children.
I mean, just look at where we are with something like IVF. Today, we can already screen embryos for major genetic diseases. It's not a huge leap to imagine a near future where parents are looking at dashboards that rank embryos based on traits like intelligence or health. The logical endpoint of all this, a future where genetically optimizing your children is just a standard option.
And that leads us to a really uncomfortable but maybe inevitable question. Today, most of us feel a little weird about the idea of designer babies. But what about in a future where you could spare your child from getting cancer or some other horrible disease just by making a choice before they're born? Suddenly, the question flips on its head. In that world, would it be cruel not to intervene? It really makes you think. What feels like science fiction today might just become the moral standard of tomorrow.